In the grim darkness of the far future, there are encounters that defy even the most twisted logic of the galaxy. Some moments capture the fundamental incompatibility between different species in ways that are both horrifying and darkly comedic. Today, we're going to explore one such scenario that perfectly encapsulates the collision between ancient Imperial technology, sacred space marine tradition, and the uniquely chaotic nature of the Ork menace. What happens when greenskin raiders stumble upon a sleeping dreadnought and decide, in their infinite wisdom, that they need to wake it up? To understand the magnitude of this catastrophic meeting, we first need to appreciate what a dreadnought truly represents in the universe of Warhammer 40,000. The sacred walking tombs. A dreadnought is not simply a weapon system or a vehicle. It is a walking tomb, a sacred reliquary that houses the barely living remains of a space marine hero who has been mortally wounded beyond even the considerable ability of Imperial medicine to repair. When a battle brother suffers injuries so catastrophic that his body is shattered beyond recovery, but his spirit and mind remain intact, the chapter may decide to grant him what is considered both the highest honor and the cruelest curse imaginable. The process of interment is as much religious ceremony as medical procedure. Apothecaries and tech marines work in concert, stripping away everything that cannot be saved. Arms, legs, organs, entire portions of the torso may be removed, leaving only the absolute minimum of organic tissue necessary to sustain consciousness. What remains, often little more than a brain, partial spinal column, and a few vital organs, is then carefully sealed within an amniotic sarcophagus filled with nutrient-rich fluid. This sarcophagus becomes the heart of the dreadnought. It is hardwired into the massive armored shell through a complex web of neural interfaces and life support systems. The Marine's consciousness becomes one with the machine. His eyes are replaced by targeting auspexes and optical sensors. His sense of touch becomes pressure readings across layers of ceramite armor. His arms become weapons capable of tearing through tank armor. Every sensation is filtered through mechanical interpretation, every action executed through servo motors and hydraulic systems that respond to his neural impulses. The psychological toll of this transformation cannot be overstated. Imagine awakening to find that you no longer have a body in any meaningful sense. You exist as a consciousness trapped within a metal shell, perceiving the world through sensor feeds and data streams. The simple act of speaking requires you to generate neural impulses that are translated into Vox-synthesized approximations of your former voice. You cannot feel the warmth of sunlight, taste food, or experience any of the thousand small sensations that define human existence. This is why dreadnoughts spend most of their existence in stasis sleep, sealed away in the deep crypts of their chapter's fortress monastery. The tech marines tend to them with religious devotion, anointing the armored shells with sacred oils and reciting the litanies of preservation. These warriors are kept in dreamless suspension, awakened only when the chapter faces threats so dire that they require the wisdom and combat prowess of their ancient heroes. Some dreadnoughts have slumbered for centuries between awakenings. Others, like the legendary Bjorn the Fell-Handed of the Space Wolves, have existed for over 10,000 years, awakened only once per millennium to share their memories of fighting alongside the Primarchs during the Great Crusade. Each time they wake, it is said, they remember a little less of who they once were. The long centuries of mechanical existence slowly erode the human elements of their consciousness, leaving behind something that is perhaps more weapon than man. The chambers where dreadnoughts rest are among the most sacred spaces in any fortress monastery. They are shrines as much as armories, places where battle brothers come to pay their respects to fallen heroes who refuse to die. The air in these halls is thick with incense and the low hum of stasis field generators. Scrolls bearing the names and deeds of the entombed warriors hang from the walls, and servo skulls drift through the darkness, maintaining eternal vigil over their charges. To disturb these halls, to defile these sacred spaces is considered one of the gravest blasphemies imaginable. And yet, when orcs breach the walls of a fortress monastery, they have no concept of sacred spaces or blasphemy. They only see opportunity. The greenskin menace. Orcs are perhaps the most resilient and widespread xenos threat in the galaxy. They are not born, but rather spawn from fungal spores, growing rapidly from small Gretchen into larger and more dangerous forms. Every orc that dies releases spores that can lie dormant for years before sprouting into new greenskins, making them virtually impossible to fully exterminate from a world once they've gained a foothold. But beyond their remarkable biology, what makes orcs truly unique is their relationship with the psychic field they generate called the Way-Egg. This Gestalt psychic energy has strange reality-warping properties that allow orc technology to function through what can only be described as collective belief. An orc shooter might be little more than a pipe with some scrap metal bolted to it, but if enough orcs believe it will shoot, the Way-Egg energy makes it so. Red vehicles go faster because orcs believe red is the fastest color. Dakka works better when there's more of it, because more Dakka is obviously better. This psychic field also gives orcs an instinctive understanding of who's in charge. Size and strength matter, but so does the unconscious psychic recognition of who's the biggest and the baddest. When orcs gather in large enough numbers, the Way-Egg energy becomes palpable, drawing more greenskins from across the stars like moths to a flame. A successful war boss can unite millions of orcs into a massive horde that crashes across entire sectors, leaving devastation in its wake. Orcs live for battle. It's not just what they do, it's what they are. They feel no fear in the way other species do. Pain is something that happens to other gits. Death is just part of the great cosmic joke, and they'll probably respawn from spores anyway. What they do feel, what drives them forward with unthinking enthusiasm, is the pure joy of a good scrap. The bigger and louder the battle, the better. And if they can loot something interesting along the way, all the more reason to get stuck in. This brings us to one of the orcs' most defining characteristics, their love of looting. Orcs are the galaxy's premier scavengers and kludge mechanics. They'll steal anything that isn't nailed down, and if it is nailed down, they'll steal the nails too. Imperial tanks, weapons, armor, even entire spaceships, all a fair game for orc mech boys to disassemble, improve, and repurpose for greenskin use. The Death Skulls clan has elevated looting to an art form, believing that blue is the luckiest color, precisely because it's the color of all the best loot they've stolen. These orcs have been known to loot enemy equipment mid-battle, strip it down, slap some plates and spikes on it, and use it against its former owners before the engagement even ends. There are even legends of orcs looting titans, those massive, cathedral-walking war machines that tower over the battlefield like mechanical gods. But here's the thing about orc looting. It operates on orc logic, which is to say, no logic at all by anyone else's standards. An orc sees a thing, decides it's dead killy or dead shooty, and wants it. The actual mechanics of how it works are secondary to the fact that it looks like it ought to work. Mech boys will cobble together weapons and vehicles from completely incompatible components, held together by faith in Gork and Mork and liberal amounts of duct tape and spot welding. When applied to sophisticated Imperial technology, this approach produces mixed results. Sometimes, through sheer chance and the reality-bending properties of the Way-Egg field, it actually works. A looted Lehman Russ tank might have half its systems replaced with scrap metal and orcish ingenuity, painted red for extra speed, and somehow still function well enough to blow things up. Other times, it spectacularly doesn't work, resulting in explosions that the orcs find nearly as entertaining as if it had worked properly. Now imagine this mindset, this complete lack of caution or reverence, turned loose in a Space Marine fortress monastery. Imagine what happens when orcs who have successfully looted tanks, aircraft, and even walking war machines encounter something that looks like the biggest, most impressive bit of loot they've ever seen. A dreadnought, silent and still in its stasis cradle, covered in sacred scripts and purity seals, bristling with weapons that make an orc's eyes light up with greedy delight. The orcs don't see a sacred tomb. They don't understand the concept of a warrior monk who has sacrificed everything to continue serving his chapter beyond death. They see a big metal box with guns on it, and their immediate thought is, "That's dead killy, that is, I want to make it work." The siege breaks. Through the fortress monastery had stood for thousands of years, weathering sieges, orbital bombardments, and demonic incursions. Its walls were meters thick, adamantium and ceramite, layered with void shields and defensive batteries that could tear apart starships. But no fortress is impregnable, and this WAG had come with numbers that beggared belief. The initial assault had been typical orc tactics, which is to say, throw enough bodies at the problem until it stops being a problem. Wave after wave of boys crashed against the outer defenses, dying in their thousands to the fortress's automated gun emplacements and the precisely coordinated fire of the defending space marines. But for every 100 orcs that fell, 1,000 more clambered over their corpses, bellowing their war cries and firing wildly in all directions. The war boss leading this particular WAG was a cunning git by orc standards, which meant he occasionally had ideas that went beyond charge at the enemy and hit them really hard. He'd gathered mech boys from a dozen different tribes and set them to work on something the orcs had looted months earlier from an abandoned Mechanicus facility, a pair of genuine siege drill mechanisms, each the size of a battle tank. These drills, originally designed for mining operations on death worlds, had been improved by the mech boys, which is to say, they'd made them bigger, louder, and more likely to explode catastrophically. They'd also painted them yellow, because yellow made things explode better. The fact that these drills were nominally for digging rather than exploding was irrelevant to orc logic. The defenders had concentrated their forces at the main gates, expecting the primary assault to come from that direction. They were partially correct. Thousands of orcs did indeed throw themselves at the gates in what appeared to be a suicidal frontal assault. But while the Space Marines were occupied cutting down greenskins by the score, the drills punched through the foundation rock 300 meters away, emerging inside the fortress's lower levels in an eruption of pulverized stone and orc war cries. The battle that followed was brutal even by the standards of Space Marine warfare. The fortress's interior became a maze of desperate close-quarters combat, with power-armored Astartes holding choke points against tides of howling greenskins. Bolter fire echoed through corridors that had known only prayer and contemplation for centuries. The chaplains led counterattacks with righteous fury, their Crozius, arcanum crushing orc skulls with each swing. Tactical squads fell back in good order, their discipline holding even as their numbers dwindled. But the orcs kept coming. For every corridor the Marines reclaimed, the greenskins broke through in 2 others. The sheer weight of numbers began to tell. Squads that had held their positions for hours were finally overwhelmed. Defensive strongpoints fell one by one. The fighting pushed deeper into the fortress, past the barracks, through the chapter halls, beyond even the armory where servitors continued loading ammunition with mechanical precision even as the battle raged around them. A mob of particularly ambitious orcs, led by a knob who fancied himself dead clever, broke away from the main fighting. They'd noticed that the Humies were defending some areas harder than others, which meant those areas must have the best loot. Following this impeccable logic, they smashed their way through a series of progressively more ornate chambers, each more heavily decorated with Imperial iconography than the last. They passed through halls where the deeds of ancient heroes were inscribed in gold leaf on black marble. They kicked over urns containing the ashes of chapter masters who had fallen in battle 1,000 years before. They ripped purity seals from the walls and used them to blow their noses. The concept of sacrilege was utterly alien to them. These were just fancy rooms that probably led to the good stuff. Finally, they reached a massive adamantium door engraved with high Gothic script and sealed with both physical locks and some kind of Humi magic that made the air shimmer. The Nob, whose name was Urgork, the Unstoppable, he'd earned the title by getting shot 12 times in one battle and being too stubborn to die, studied the door with the intense focus that orcs reserve for things they really, really want to hit. "This looks important," he declared. "Which means what's behind it must be dead good. Get the door open, boys." What followed was a masterclass in orc problem solving. They tried shooting the door, which accomplished nothing except making a lot of noise and ricochets that wounded 2 of the boys. They tried hitting it with choppers, which bent the choppers. They tried using a rocket launcher at point-blank range, which did manage to scorch the door slightly, and also killed the orc who'd been standing next to the launcher. Finally, one of the orcs noticed that there was a much less impressive-looking door set into the wall about 20 meters away. This door was locked, but it was also made of something less substantial than adamantium. They kicked it in and found themselves in what appeared to be some kind of maintenance corridor. Following the corridor led them to a chamber filled with Humi machinery that hummed and sparked with power. The orcs had absolutely no idea what any of this equipment did, but they knew that when you wanted something to stop working, you hit it with things. And when you wanted something to open, you turned off the things that kept it closed. Through a combination of random vandalism and sheer dumb luck, they managed to disable the power systems controlling the great door's locking mechanisms. The door slid open with a hiss of equalizing pressure, revealing darkness beyond. Emergency lighting flickered on, dim red illumination that barely penetrated the gloom. The orcs charged in, whooping and hollering, ready to claim whatever amazing loot waited for them in this super-secret Humi chamber. What they found made even orcs pause in something approaching awe. The Hall of the Ancients. The chamber was vast, its ceiling disappearing into shadow far above. The walls were lined with alcoves, and in each alcove stood something that made Urgork's heart race with greedy excitement. Dreadnoughts, dozens of them. Ancient suits of armor, some patterns so old they predated the Horus heresy itself. Each one was a masterwork of the Mechanicus's art, standing silent and still in individual stasis, cradles that hummed with barely audible power. The Space Marines of this chapter evidently believed in elaborate decoration of their honored dead. Every dreadnought was covered in purity seals, each one bearing the names of battles fought and enemies vanquished. Some had chains of commendation hanging from their armored frames. Others bore the personal heraldry of companies long since disbanded and reformed. Several had actual banners draped across their shoulders, faded with age, but still proudly displaying the chapter's colors. The sarcophagi themselves, the armored coffins that housed what remained of the fallen warriors, were works of art, engraved with scenes from their lives, inscribed with prayers and litanies, adorned with devotional imagery that spoke to the emperor's glory and the warrior's sacrifice. Each one told the story of a hero, though the orcs neither knew nor cared about such things. What the orcs did notice was the weapons. Assault cannons that could shred tanks, power fists capable of crushing battle armor like tin cans, missile launchers, lascannons, plasma cannons, flamers, heavy bolters. Every dreadnought was armed with enough firepower to take on a squad of enemy infantry single-handedly, and the orcs could see every magnificent instrument of destruction clearly. "Lads," Urgork breathed, his voice filled with the kind of reverence orcs normally reserve only for describing a really good fight. "We's hit the jackpot. Look at all this. We could have the biggest, best-equipped mob in the whole war." The other orcs murmured agreement, their eyes gleaming with avarice. In their minds, they were already imagining themselves as the envy of every greenskin in the warband. They'd have the best loot, the most impressive-looking gear, and most importantly, they'd have stolen it right out from under the Humies' noses. That was worth more than any number of teeth. But there was a problem, one that even Orks could identify. None of the dreadnoughts were moving. They just stood there, silent and still, like really impressive statues. Now, Orks had looted plenty of vehicles and machines before, but those were usually either already running or could be made to run with some percussive maintenance and creative rewiring. These big metal boxes didn't even have any obvious buttons or levers. One of the boys, a mech boy called Grotluk, who fancied himself a proper engineer, approached the nearest dreadnought and began examining it more closely. He poked at the sarcophagus. He tapped on the armor plating, listening to the sound it made. He traced the heavy power cables that ran from the stasis cradle into the dreadnought's back. "I think," he said slowly, his face screwed up in concentration. "I think they's sleeping." "Sleeping?" Urgork echoed. "What, like the Humies are inside and having a kip?" "Nah, not like that. I mean, yeah, there's probably Humies inside, but I think the whole thing is sleeping. Look at all these cables and things. This is keeping them from working, see? It's like when the mechs shut down the stompers between fights, yeah? To save the power and stop them from wandering off and stomping things we don't want stomped yet." This explanation made sense to the other Orks, which was impressive given that it was only about 30% accurate to how dreadnought stasis systems actually worked. But the conclusion was correct. These war machines were in some kind of standby mode, and the Orks needed to wake them up if they wanted to loot them properly. "Right then," Urgork declared. "We wake 'em up. Grotluk, you're the mech. Figure out how to get 'em working." This presented Grotluk with a problem. He was a mech boy, yes, but his expertise was primarily in hitting things with wrenches until they either started working or exploded. The dreadnought stasis systems were vastly more sophisticated than anything he'd ever worked on. The control panels were labeled in High Gothic, which he couldn't read. The power flow systems were protected by redundant failsafes and machine spirit appeasement protocols. The whole setup was designed to be operated only by trained tech marines who had spent decades learning the proper rituals and procedures. Grotluk considered all of this for about 3 seconds before dismissing it as unnecessary worry-making. He was an Ork. Orks didn't need to understand how things worked to make them work. They just needed to apply the right amount of enthusiasm and violence. "Oi lads," he called out. "Start it in things and see what happens." The awakening attempts begin. What followed was perhaps the most chaotic experimental tech heresy ever perpetrated in a Space Marine fortress monastery, conducted with all the scientific rigor and cautious methodology that Orks are famous for, which is to say, none whatsoever. The first approach was the time-honored Ork tradition of percussive maintenance. A dozen boys began beating on the nearest dreadnought with choppers, spanners, and their bare fists. They hit the leg joints. They hammered on the sarcophagus. They kicked the feet. They headbutted the armor plating. The dreadnought, its ceramite shell hardened to withstand anti-tank weapons, bore this assault with complete indifference. "Hit it harder," Urgork encouraged. "Maybe it needs a proper wake-up call." The Orks obliged with enthusiasm. One of them, thinking himself particularly clever, climbed up onto the dreadnought's shoulder and started beating on its head with a pipe. Another began sawing at the power cables with a blade, figuring that if they couldn't wake it up, they could at least disconnect it and drag it away. This proved more difficult than anticipated, as the cables were reinforced with adamantium weave and blessed by the Omnissiah's tech priests. After several minutes of this achieving nothing except tired Orks and a few bent weapons, Grotluk called for a different approach. "Right, hitting it ain't working. Let's try shooting it." This suggestion was met with immediate approval. Orks always enjoyed an excuse to shoot things. The boys backed away from the dreadnought and opened fire with sluggers and shooters, filling the air with a hail of poorly aimed bullets. Most of these ricocheted off the dreadnought's armor, creating spectacular sparks but no actual damage. A few shots hit the stasis cradle equipment, causing minor damage to systems the Orks didn't understand and couldn't have explained if they tried. One lucky shot severed a data cable that connected the stasis cradle to the fortress's central power grid. The cable sparked and fell away, trailing smoke. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, deep within the Dreadnought, ancient systems began to respond to the loss of external power. Emergency protocols initiated. Backup power cells, dormant for decades, started to charge. The Orks, of course, noticed none of this. They were too busy arguing about whose shot had hit what, and whether they should try using the rocket launcher again, given how much fun it had been the first time, despite it killing one of them. Grotluk, meanwhile, had found the main control panel for the stasis system. It was a complex array of switches, dials, and display screens showing information in binary and high Gothic. To the mech boy, it looked like a really complicated puzzle that needed solving. His solution was elegant in its simplicity. He started flipping every switch and pushing every button he could find. Power levels fluctuated wildly. Stasis fields flickered and stabilized. Warning lights began blinking across the panel, indicating system errors that would have sent any tech marine scrambling to undo the damage. Grotluk, unable to read any of the warnings, simply kept pressing buttons until something interesting happened. The something interesting turned out to be a catastrophic cascade failure of the stasis field maintaining one of the dreadnoughts. The field collapsed entirely, and for the first time in nearly a century, the warrior entombed within began to wake. The stirring of the ancient. Inside the sarcophagus, suspended in amniotic fluid that had kept his ruined body alive for longer than some civilizations had existed, Brother Ancient Valdis of the Third Company began the agonizing journey from dreamless sleep to something resembling consciousness. The first thing he became aware of was pain, not the sharp, immediate pain of injury, but the deep, grinding ache of a body that had been reduced to its barest components and was now being forced to function after long dormancy. His nerve endings, such as they were, sent confused signals to a brain that was still struggling to fully wake. The second thing he became aware of was sound. His auditory senses, inactive for decades, suddenly flooded his consciousness with input. Shouting. Crude, guttural shouting in a language that his cogitator banks slowly identified as Orkish dialects. Warning klaxons, the clash of metal on metal, weapons fire. Valdis's mind, still sluggish from stasis sleep, tried to make sense of these inputs. He was in the chapter's fortress monastery. He was certain of that. But there were Orks inside the fortress. That couldn't be right. The fortress had never fallen, not in 3,000 years of standing against the enemies of mankind. He must be confused. He must be remembering wrong. His third awareness was of his weapons systems. The Dreadnought's machine spirit, a simple artificial intelligence that managed the complex systems of the war machine, was running through diagnostic checks. Assault cannon, functional. Power fist, functional. Targeting arrays, degraded but operational. Locomotion systems, coming online. Outside, the Orks had noticed that one of the dreadnoughts was making different sounds than before. Instead of the quiet hum of stasis sleep, they could hear the whir of servos and the deeper rumble of power systems activating. Indicator lights were coming on across its chassis. The optical sensors that served as its eyes flickered from dark to a dim red glow. "I think we did it," Grotluk exclaimed. "I think it's waking up." The Orks crowded closer, eager to see their success. Several of them were already arguing about who would get to claim the prize once it was fully active and ready to be looted. Urgork was trying to figure out how they'd get it out of the fortress monastery. One optimistic boy was suggesting they could ride inside it, like it was some kind of really fancy Death Dread. None of them noticed the way the Dreadnought's assault cannon had begun tracking their movements. None of them recognized the change in the optical sensors from dim red to angry crimson. None of them understood that what was waking up inside that armored shell was not a machine, but a warrior who had fought in the Emperor's wars for longer than their entire species' presence on this world. Inside the sarcophagus, Valdis's consciousness finally assembled enough scattered pieces of awareness to understand what was happening. Orks. In the sacred halls. defiling the resting places of his brothers, trying to steal the honored dead like common looters picking through battlefield debris. Rage, pure and incandescent, burned through the confusion of his awakening. It was an emotion so powerful that it cut through centuries of mental conditioning and the dulling effects of long stasis. For the first time in nearly 100 years, Brother Ancient Valdis felt something with absolute clarity, and what he felt was a burning need to purge the Xenos filth that dared defile this sacred space. His connection to the Dreadnought systems solidified. The machine spirit recognized the fury of its pilot and responded in kind. Weapon systems that had been merely functional moments before suddenly came online with predatory eagerness. Targeting solutions calculated themselves automatically. Threat assessment protocols identified 17 Xenos signatures in the immediate vicinity. The Orks got about half a second of warning before everything went catastrophically wrong for them. The Ancient awakens. The assault cannon opened fire. In the enclosed space of the chamber, the sound was deafening beyond description. Each shell was a mass-reactive explosive round designed to penetrate power armor before detonating. Against unarmored Orks in an enclosed space, the effect was catastrophic. The first burst caught 3 boys who had been standing directly in front of the Dreadnought, debating the merits of red paint versus yellow. They simply ceased to exist as recognizable entities, replaced by clouds of red mist and scattered body parts. The cannon kept firing, traversing left and right with mechanical precision. Orks scattered or tried to. In the confined space of the chamber, there was nowhere to go. Those who dove for cover behind other dreadnoughts found that mass-reactive shells could shoot through multiple bodies before detonating. Those who tried to run for the door were cut down before they'd taken 3 steps. Urgork, to his credit, had the presence of mind to try fighting back. He raised his shooter and fired a burst at the Dreadnought, the bullet sparking harmlessly off its armor. "Shoot it!" he bellowed at his remaining boys. "Shoot the git!" The surviving Orks opened fire with everything they had. Slugger rounds, shooter bursts, even one rocket that someone had been saving for a special occasion. The rocket hit the Dreadnought square in the chest, creating an impressive explosion and accomplishing absolutely nothing beyond scorching the paint. The small arms fire was even less effective, ricocheting off ceramite plates that could shrug off Lascanon hits. Valdis barely noticed the enemy fire. His attention was focused on the tactical problem before him. 17 Xenos in an enclosed space, no friendly units to worry about hitting, and weapon systems that had been designed for exactly this kind of close-quarters purging. The solution was elegant in its simplicity. The Dreadnought stepped forward out of its stasis cradle. The movement was shockingly fast for something so massive. Where before it had been still as a statue, now it moved with the fluid grace of a predator. Each step sent tremors through the floor. The servos in its legs whined with power. The assault cannon kept firing in controlled bursts, each one claiming another Ork life. Grotluk, the mech boy who had started this entire disaster, found himself face to face with several tons of angry adamantium and ceramite. He had just enough time to realize his mistake before the Dreadnought's power fist closed around his torso. The fist was equipped with an energy field generator that disrupted molecular bonds on contact. When it squeezed, Grotluk didn't just get crushed. He got atomized, his body breaking down into component particles with a wet popping sound. The Dreadnought strode forward, each step crushing Ork bodies beneath its massive feet. Valdis had fully synchronized with the machine spirit now. Targeting data flowed seamlessly into his consciousness. Ammunition counters updated in real time. Damage reports showed minimal wear to systems. Everything was functioning exactly as it should, as if he'd been fighting yesterday rather than sleeping for decades. An Ork boy, either braver or stupider than his fellows, charged at the Dreadnought with a chopper raised high. Valdis didn't even need to use weapons for this one. He simply backhanded the greenskin with the assault cannon, sending it flying across the chamber to impact the wall with bone-shattering force. Urgork, Watching his mob get systematically slaughtered made a tactical decision that would have impressed any Imperial Guard commander. He decided discretion was the better part of valor and ran for the exit. The surviving Orks, seeing their leader flee, followed suit. They trampled each other in their haste to escape, abandoning weapons and wounded in their panic. Farthest let them go, not out of mercy, but out of tactical calculation. Let them run. Let them tell the other greenskins what awaited anyone who dared defile this place. Let them spread fear among their own kind. That was worth more than a few extra kills. The assault cannon fell silent. In the sudden quiet, the only sounds were the hum of the Dreadnought's power plant and the dripping of various fluids from the destroyed Orks. Farthest took a moment to survey the chamber, his optical sensors adjusting to low-light conditions with practiced ease. The other Dreadnoughts still slumbered in their stasis cradles, undisturbed by the violence that had erupted around them. Farthest could see their name plaques: Brother Ancient Morpheus, fallen in the Gehenna campaign; Brother Ancient Kaldor, who had served 3 chapter masters; Brother Ancient Talus, the oldest among them, who had fought in the age of the Great Crusade itself. All still asleep, all still at peace. That, at least, was something to be grateful for. They deserved their rest. But Farthest's rest was over. He could hear the sounds of battle echoing through the fortress monastery. Explosions, bolter fire, the roar of chainswords meeting orc flesh. His brothers were fighting, and he was needed. The Dreadnought turned and strode toward the door, its feet leaving craters in the sacred stone where it stepped. Outside, war awaited. And Brother Ancient Farthest, who had slept through the reigns of 3 chapter masters and the rise and fall of entire human civilizations, was ready to show these Xenos why Dreadnoughts were considered the finest warriors of the Adeptus Astartes. The Orc perspective on disaster, Ork, the unstoppable, crashed through corridors in a flat-out sprint that would have impressed even the evil sun's speed freaks. Behind him, he could hear the remaining members of his mob panting and cursing as they fled from what had turned into their worst scrap ever. "Boss! Boss, wait up!" one of the boys wheezed. "Shut it and keep running!" Ork snarled back. He wasn't about to slow down, not with that thing potentially following them. His mind was racing almost as fast as his legs, trying to process what had just happened. They'd thought they were looting some kind of Hume walker. Big, impressive, covered in guns and dead shooty. That was what they'd seen. What they'd actually woken up was something far worse, a Hume war machine with a Hume inside it. And not just any Hume, one of the beakies, one of the really killy ones that didn't die proper when you shot them. The thing had torn through his mob like they were Gretchen. Grotlurk, who'd been the smartest boy Ork had ever known, had gotten squashed so hard there wasn't enough left of him to identify. Half the others had been turned into red paste by that spinning shooty gun. The ones who'd tried to fight had died even faster than the ones who'd run. As they burst out of the fancy chambers and back into the main corridors where the rest of the Waag was still fighting, Ork finally allowed himself to slow down. Around them, the battle raged on. Orks and Space Marines were locked in brutal close-quarters combat, neither side giving ground. One of the other knobs, a massive orc called Grimguts, spotted Ork's depleted mob and ambled over. "Oi, Ork! Where's the rest of your boys? And why ain't you in the fight?" Ork tried to think of a way to explain what had happened that didn't make him sound like he'd been beaten by a sleeping Hume. His mouth worked, but for a moment, no words came out. That's when they heard it. A sound like rolling thunder, rhythmic and relentless. Footsteps, massive footsteps, getting closer. The Dreadnought emerged from the corridor like a vision from an Orc's worst nightmare. It was covered in the gore of the boys it had killed, giving it a red sheen that the Orcs might have admired if it wasn't being used to kill them. Its assault cannon was still spinning, the barrels glowing with residual heat. Its optical sensors swept the corridor, identifying targets with cold mechanical precision. "What in Gork's name is that?" Grimguts bellowed. "Dat!" Ork said with the resigned tone of someone who had learned an important lesson too late. is why you don't wake up sleeping things in the Humi fortress. The Dreadnought opened fire. The Ancient's rampage brother, Ancient Valdis, had fought in more campaigns than most Space Marines would see in 10 lifetimes. He had defended hive worlds against tyrannid swarms. He had boarded chaos cruisers in the depths of the void. He had stood in the shield wall at the siege of Kardasha, while demons threw themselves against blessed Ceramite. He had seen things that would break the minds of lesser beings, and he had endured. But it had been nearly a century since he'd last fought, and in that time, he had forgotten what it felt like, the rush of combat, the perfect clarity that came when every system aligned toward a single purpose, the destruction of the Emperor's enemies, the satisfaction of seeing tactical plans executed with flawless precision. He had forgotten, but his body, such as it was, remembered. The corridor was a killing field. Orks charged at him in their typical fashion, which was to say with no coordination and maximum enthusiasm. Valdis met them with methodical brutality. The assault cannon harvested them like wheat before a scythe. Those that closed to melee range discovered that a Dreadnought power fist could punch through Ork bodies with the same ease it could punch through tank armor. Vox traffic chattered in Valdis's audio receptors. His battle brothers, scattered throughout the fortress, coordinating their defense. He heard Squad Tiberius requesting ammunition resupply in the eastern barracks. He heard Chaplain Meridius leading a counterattack through the chapel halls. He heard the cold, precise voice of the chapter master directing forces from the command center. And he heard the call for reinforcements at the main gates, where the Ork assault was threatening to break through the last line of defense. Valdis marked the location on his tactical map and began moving toward it. Orks tried to stop him. They failed. His path through the fortress monastery was marked by destroyed greenskin bodies and walls pockmarked with bullet impacts where return fire had gone wide. A mob of Orks had set up a crude barricade using looted furniture and dead bodies. Behind it, they were firing at a squad of Space Marines who had taken cover in an alcove. The Marines were pinned down, unable to advance without taking casualties. Valdis didn't slow down. He simply walked through the barricade. The assault cannon demolished the makeshift fortification, and his massive bulk crushed anything that remained. The Orks behind the barricade scattered, but not quickly enough. Power Fist met greenskin flesh with terminal results. "Brother Ancient," the squad's sergeant voxed, his voice carrying both relief and amazement. "We did not know any of the honored ancients had been awakened." "The Xenos awakened me," Valdis replied, his voice a mechanical approximation of what it had once been. "They will come to regret this. Squad Severus, advance on the main gates. I will clear the path. By your command, Ancient One." The Marines fell in behind the Dreadnought, using its bulk as mobile cover. Together, they pushed through the fortress, reclaiming corridor after corridor. The Orks, disorganized and increasingly demoralized, began to fall back. Valdis noted this with cold satisfaction. Fear was setting in. Good. Let them feel what it meant to face the Emperor's finest. The Ork warboss takes notice. Warboss Urgskull's Skullthumper had been having a great time. The Humi fortress had proven to be a proper challenge, with plenty of fighting and loads of loot. His boys were having the time of their lives, even the ones who were dying. It was, by Ork standards, a nearly perfect wah. Then the reports started coming in about some kind of big Humi walker that was crumping boys by the dozen. At first, Urgskull dismissed it. Humis had lots of big walkers. That's what rockets were for. But the reports kept coming, and they kept getting worse. The thing was unstoppable. It was killing Orks faster than they could swarm it. It was pushing back entire mobs single-handedly. Urgskull decided to investigate personally. He was the biggest, toughest Ork in the Wa'ag, after all. If there was something that needed crumping, he was the git to do it. He found the Dreadnought in the fortress's main hall, standing over the bodies of what must have been 50 Orks. It was methodically executing wounded greenskins with precise shots from its assault cannon, making sure none of them could get back up to fight again. Around it, the surviving orcs kept their distance, unwilling to charge something that had so thoroughly demolished their fellows. Urgskull studied the war machine with the keen eye of a veteran fighter. It was big, yeah, but he'd fought bigger. It was well armed, but so was he. And most importantly, it was a challenge. A proper challenge. The kind that would make for a great story if he won. "Oi!" he bellowed. "You, big metal git, fight me, one-on-one. Prove you're the best." Inside the Dreadnought, Valdis processed this challenge with something that might have been amusement if he still had the facial features to smile. An orc war boss, judging by the size and the ornate armor, was challenging him to single combat. How? Predictable. He could have simply shot the greenskin where it stood. The assault cannon would have made short work of even a war boss. But there was value in accepting challenges, especially when it might demoralize the enemy. Let the orcs see their leader fall in single combat. Let them understand that even their strongest was no match for a Space Marine dreadnought. "Come then, Xenos," Valdis replied through his Vox speakers, his mechanical voice echoing through the hall. "Meet your end with whatever passes for honor among your kind." Urgskull charged with a roar that shook the walls. He swung a massive power claw that could have torn through tank armor. Valdis met the attack with his power fist, and the two weapons collided with a thunderclap of released energy that sent nearby orcs tumbling backward from the shockwave. The war boss was strong. Valdis had to admit that much. Stronger than any orc he'd fought in his long career. The power claw locked with his fist in a contest of raw strength, servos whining against muscle and bone. For a moment, they were evenly matched. Then Valdis remembered that he was a dreadnought, and dreadnoughts don't fight fair. While the war boss was focused on the power fist, the assault cannon swiveled on its mount and fired a burst into the orc's torso at point-blank range. Urgskull Skull Thumper, war boss of the Green Tide. Whag! Toughest orc in 3 sectors, died before he hit the ground. The remaining orcs, seeing their leader fall, did what orcs always do when their leadership structure collapses. They started fighting amongst themselves over who was in charge next. Valdis stepped over the war boss's corpse and continued his advance toward the main gates. The impossible persistence. You would think that after witnessing their war boss get torn apart by an angry metal box, the orcs would have learned their lesson about trying to loot dreadnoughts. You would be wrong, because here's the thing about orcs. They are not a species that learns from mistakes in the way other species do. An orc sees another orc fail at something, and his immediate thought is not, "That approach doesn't work." It's, "I bet I could do it better." So even as Valdis was cutting a bloody path through the fortress, there were still orcs elsewhere in the complex who had found the dreadnought chambers and were absolutely convinced they could succeed where Urgork had failed. A new mob, this one led by a big mech called Nutskraker, had breached into the sacred halls through a different route. They found the scene of carnage that Urgork had left behind, bodies and debris scattered everywhere, and came to a completely different conclusion than any sensible species would have. "See?" Nutskraker said, pointing at the destroyed orcs with his power claw. "That mob got it working. They just didn't do it right. But we's smarter. We can do it properly." His logic was that if one dreadnought had woken up and started crumping, it proved the dreadnoughts could be activated. The fact that the activation had resulted in immediate violent death for everyone involved was just a technical problem that needed solving. "Right," Nutskraker declared. "We need to be more careful like. Can't just wake 'em up anywhere. We need to get 'em somewhere safe first, then wake 'em up, then get in 'em and drive 'em around." This plan had so many logical flaws that it would take several pages to enumerate them all, but Nutskraker was convinced it would work, and when a big mech is convinced of something, other orcs tend to go along with it. They selected one of the smaller dreadnoughts, figuring it would be easier to move. They disconnected it from its stasis cradle by the simple expedient of cutting every cable they could reach with choppers. Then they tried to tip it over onto some kind of improvised sledge made from a door they'd torn off its hinges. The dreadnought, without power and without its stasis cradle, weighed approximately 3 tons. The Orks discovered this when they tried to tip it, and it didn't move. They pushed harder. Still nothing. They brought in more buoys. The Dreadnought remained obstinately vertical. "We need more Orks," Nutskraka declared. "Get every git you can find. We's gonna move this thing." What happened next was perhaps the most absurd scene ever to unfold in a Space Marine fortress monastery. 20 Orks, working in something approximating coordination, managed to rock the Dreadnought back and forth. After several minutes of effort that left them all exhausted, they finally tipped it over with a resounding crash. The impact of 3 tons of metal hitting the floor sent tremors through the entire section of the fortress. It also triggered every security alarm in the vicinity and alerted every Space Marine within earshot that something very wrong was happening in the Dreadnought chambers. Meanwhile, the Orks were celebrating their success. They'd moved the big metal box. Now all they had to do was get it out of the fortress, wake it up, and figure out how to get inside and drive it. How hard could it be? Tech Marines respond. Brother Tech Marine Hadrian had been in the fortress's armory, maintaining the chapter's vehicles and weapons systems when the alarms went off. The specific alarm code told him everything he needed to know: unauthorized access to the Dreadnought crypts. He sprinted through the corridors with a speed that would have seemed impossible for someone wearing a full suit of power armor. His servo harness clanked and whirred as he ran, the mechanical limbs folding close to his body to avoid catching on door frames. Behind him, 3 other Tech Marines and a squad of Battle Brothers followed. They found the Orks trying to drag a Dreadnought down a corridor. The Greenskins had figured out that pulling was more effective than pushing, and had rigged up a crude harness using power cables they'd torn from the walls. About a dozen of them were straining against the harness while Nutskraka shouted encouragement and hit them with a wrench when they slacked off. Hadrian stopped dead in his tracks. For a moment, his mind simply refused to process what he was seeing. These Xenos they were trying to steal a Dreadnought, one of the sacred warrior tombs. They were dragging it across the floor like a piece of scrap metal. The rage that filled him was cold and precise, the anger of a Tech Marine who has witnessed the most unforgivable tech heresy imaginable. "Open fire," he said quietly into the Vox. The Battle Brothers behind him needed no further encouragement. Bolt of fire filled the corridor. The Orks, caught completely by surprise and with no cover, died where they stood. Nutskraka managed to get his custom force field up in time to deflect the first few shots, but sustained bolt of fire overwhelmed it. The big mech died screaming technical specifications that would have been innovative in other circumstances. Hadrian approached the fallen Dreadnought with something approaching religious reverence. He ran his hands over the armor plating, checking for damage. He examined the severed power cables, noting which would need to be replaced entirely and which could be repaired. His servo arms extended, their various tools already analyzing the harm done. "Brother Ancient Morpheus," he whispered, reading the name plaque. "Forgive us for allowing you to be defiled so." The other Tech Marines joined him, and together they began the sacred rites of restoration. It would take hours to properly reconnect the Dreadnought to its stasis cradle and ensure that all systems were functioning correctly. But they would do it, and they would do it right, because this was not merely a piece of equipment. This was a fallen brother, a hero of the chapter, and he deserved nothing less than their absolute best. Above them, the battle for the fortress raged on. But here, in this moment, there was only the quiet work of repair and restoration, the gentle cant of the litanies of maintenance, and the solemn determination to ensure that Brother Ancient Morpheus could return to his well-earned rest. The tide turns. Brother Ancient Valdis reached the main gates just as the last line of defense was about to break. The Orks had brought up one of their ridiculous battle wagons, a ramshackle vehicle covered in spikes and guns, and Orks hanging off every available surface. It was ramming the gates repeatedly, and with each impact, the ancient adamantium cracked and buckled a little more. Behind the gates, a thin line of Space Marines held the final barricade. They were exhausted, running low on ammunition, and facing an enemy that seemed to have infinite numbers. But they did not break. They did not falter. They were Space Marines, and they would hold this position until death or victory. Then Valdis arrived, and suddenly, the Space Marines were no longer alone. The Dreadnought strode into the gatehouse with the confidence of a warrior who had fought in sieges that these Orks couldn't even imagine. He assessed the tactical situation in microseconds. Weak point in enemy formation, battle wagon presenting significant threat, opportunity for devastating counterattack. Brothers, he voxed to the defenders. When I breach the gates, advance and purge, leave nothing alive. By your command, Ancient One, came the reply. Valdis placed his power fist against the gates from the inside. The energy field crackled to life. Then, with one massive push, he drove his fist through the damaged metal and tore a section of the gate away, creating an opening large enough for him to pass through. The Orks on the other side had about 1 second to register that the gates were opening before Valdis emerged into their midst like an armored god of war. The assault cannon opened up at full auto, spraying mass reactive shells into the packed Ork formation. Bodies exploded, the battle wagon took multiple hits, and its fuel tank ruptured, turning it into a rolling fireball that crashed into the Ork lines behind it. The Space Marines poured through the gap, bolters barking their hymn of death. What had been a desperate last stand became a rout as the Emperor's finest slaughtered the greenskins with methodical precision. Valdis stood at the center of it all, a beacon of destruction around which his battle brothers rallied. The Orks, seeing their assault collapse and their leader dead, did what Orks do when a wag falls apart. They scattered. Some tried to flee back to their ships. Others went to ground in the ruins outside the fortress, hoping to escape notice. A few, the really stupid ones, tried to take shelter inside the fortress itself, hiding in whatever holes they could find. This would prove to be a mistake. The Purge. The battle for the fortress monastery was over, but the war was not. Scattered Orks remained throughout the complex, hiding in maintenance tunnels, storage rooms, and forgotten corners. They would need to be hunted down and eliminated, every last one of them, because to leave even a single spore alive meant the possibility of future infestation. Brother Ancient Valdis joined the purge with grim determination. For 3 days, he stalked through the corridors of his home, searching for Xenos that had dared to defile sacred ground. His sensors could detect Ork biosignatures through walls. His weapons could kill them no matter where they tried to hide. He found a group of Gretchen who had hidden in a food storage chamber, eating their way through supplies meant for human serfs. The assault cannon made short work of them. He found a mob of boys who had barricaded themselves in the chapter's archive. They had been using priceless historical texts as kindling for their fires. Valdis didn't use his guns for these ones. He crushed them personally, one by one, making sure each death was slow enough that they understood why they were dying. He found one last survivor in the Dreadnought chambers, an Ork mech boy who had hidden behind one of the stasis cradles and was trying to hotwire the power systems. The greenskin looked up as Valdis entered, and for once, an Ork showed something like genuine fear. I was just, the mech boy stammered. Valdis didn't let him finish. There were no words adequate to express his contempt for a creature that would desecrate this place. The power fist did the talking. When the purge was finally complete, when the last Ork had been killed and the last spore burned from the walls, the chapter gathered in the fortress's main hall. Nearly 200 Space Marines had given their lives in the defense. Countless more had been wounded. The fortress itself bore the scars of battle, with entire sections needing reconstruction. But they had held. The fortress had not fallen. The honored dead still rested in peace, save for one. The return to rest. Brother Ancient Valdis stood before the chapter master, Brother Captain Aurelius, and the assembled leaders of the chapter. Around them, Tech Marines worked to repair damage and restore sacred systems. The air smelled of promethium and incense. Brother, Ancient, Aurelius said, his voice carrying both gratitude and sorrow. Your awakening was unplanned, but the Emperor's timing is always perfect. Without your intervention, we may well have lost the fortress." Valdis inclined his Dreadnought's head in acknowledgement. "I served as I was meant to serve. The Greenskins paid for their blasphemy." "They did indeed. The question now is, do you wish to return to your rest, or would you remain active to serve the chapter in the wars to come?" It was a genuine question. Some Dreadnoughts, once awakened, chose to remain active, fighting battle after battle until final destruction claimed them. Others gratefully returned to stasis sleep, seeking the peace of dreamless dark. Valdis considered. He had forgotten what it felt like to fight, but now he remembered. The clarity, the purpose, the satisfaction of serving the Emperor and defending his realm. It would be easy to say yes, to remain active, to continue this new life of endless war. But he also remembered the cost, the isolation, the gradual erosion of humanity as the machine subsumed more and more of what he had once been. The knowledge that every battle brought him closer to the day when he would finally forget who Brother Valdis had been entirely. "I would return to my rest," he said finally. "Wake me when the chapter faces need great enough. Until then, let me sleep. Let me remember my brothers as they were when I fell, not watch them age and die while I endure." Aurelius nodded with understanding. "So shall it be, Ancient One. Rest well, and know that your service this day will be remembered in the chapter's annals for generations to come." The Tech Marines led Valdis back to the Dreadnought crypts. The chambers had been cleansed and sanctified, all traces of the Ork intrusion removed. New purity seals had been inscribed and placed. The other Dreadnoughts still slumbered in their cradles, undisturbed. They reconnected the power cables with reverent care, each connection made according to the proper rituals. They anointed the armor with sacred oils and spoke the litanies of preservation. And finally, they activated the stasis field. Inside the sarcophagus, Valdis felt consciousness beginning to slip away. The sharp clarity of awareness faded, replaced by the comfortable darkness of stasis sleep. His last thought before the sleep claimed him was a simple prayer, that when he woke again, it would be to defend his brothers, and not because Greenskins had been stupid enough to try waking him up. The Tech Marines sealed the chamber and set new Guardian protocols. Additional blast doors were installed. New security systems, ones that even Orks couldn't accidentally trigger, were put in place. And over the entrance to the chamber, they placed a new inscription in High Gothic. "Here, rest the honored dead. Disturb them at your peril." Lessons learned. The battle for the Fortress Monastery entered the chapter's history as the Purge of the Green Tide. In the official records, it was noted as a hard-fought victory against overwhelming odds, with particular commendation given to Brother Ancient Valdis for his unexpected but crucial intervention. In the less official records, the ones that chaplains told to new initiates as cautionary tales, it became a lesson about the importance of properly securing sacred spaces, and about what happens when Orks are allowed to blunder around in areas they absolutely should not be in. For the Orks, the story took on a life of its own. The survivors of Ork's mob spread tales about the sleeping metal monster that had awakened and slaughtered their fellows. Other Orks, hearing these tales, came to entirely the wrong conclusions. "So what you're saying," one Ork said to Ork during a post-battle drinking session, "is that if we find where the Humies keep these things, we could have the biggest, baddest mob ever." Ork, who had learned absolutely nothing from the experience, nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, we just need to figure out how to wake 'em up without getting crumped. Maybe if we's bigger and tougher when we try it." And so the cycle continued. Because that's the thing about Orks. They don't learn from their mistakes. They don't adapt based on past failures. They just keep trying the same things over and over, convinced that this time, with enough enthusiasm and daca, it'll work out differently. Somewhere in the galaxy, there's probably an Ork warboss right now, breaking into a Space Marine fortress monastery, finding a Dreadnought chamber, and thinking, "That's dead killy. I wonder if I can loot it. And somewhere, a sleeping dreadnought is about to have a very rude awakening. The broader implications. This scenario, while darkly humorous, illustrates some fundamental truths about the Warhammer 40,000 universe. First, it demonstrates the absolute incompatibility between Ork logic and Imperial sacred tradition. What the Space Marines view as their most honored dead, deserving of reverence and protection, the Orks see as potentially lootable war machines. There's no middle ground for understanding between these perspectives. Second, it showcases the terrifying effectiveness of dreadnoughts in combat. These aren't just walking tanks. They're the concentrated fury of the Emperor's finest warriors, magnified through tons of armor and devastating weaponry. A single dreadnought can turn the tide of a battle, and when awakened with righteous anger at the desecration of sacred ground, they become nigh unstoppable forces of destruction. Third, it highlights the persistence and adaptability of the Ork menace. Even after witnessing the catastrophic results of trying to wake a dreadnought, Orks will continue attempting it. They'll try different approaches, bring more boys, maybe use more Daka. The fact that every attempt ends in failure doesn't discourage them. If anything, it just makes them more determined to eventually get it right. For Space Marine chapters, this presents an ongoing security concern. It's not enough to have thick walls and powerful defenses. They need to ensure that even if enemies breach those defenses, their most sacred spaces remain protected. The Dreadnought chambers, in particular, require multiple layers of security because of both the strategic value of the war machines and the absolute catastrophe that could result from them being improperly activated. Imagine a scenario where Orks actually succeeded in looting a dreadnought intact. Imagine them trying to make it work using Ork technology and energy. The result would be something between a death dread and a blasphemous parody of Imperial tech. It would probably explode within the first hour of operation, but that hour could do tremendous damage. Or worse, imagine if Chaos forces got their hands on loyalist dreadnoughts. The traitor legions have their own dreadnoughts, twisted and corrupted things called hellbrutes that have been driven mad by millennia of exposure to the warp. But a recently awakened loyalist dreadnought, captured and subjected to the ministrations of dark Mechanicum warpsmiths, could potentially be corrupted and turned against its own chapter. The psychological warfare value alone would be devastating. This is why Space Marine chapters guard their dreadnoughts so carefully. This is why the chambers where they rest are sealed with the best security the Imperium can provide. And this is why, when those defenses fail and enemies reach those sacred halls, the response is immediate and overwhelming. The Orks who attempted to wake Brother Ancient Valdis learned this lesson the hard way. Most of them didn't live long enough to benefit from the knowledge. The few who survived carried tales of terror back to their fellows. Tales that would be dismissed as just Yumi's being sneaky, but that might, just might, make a few Orks think twice before trying to loot a sleeping dreadnought. Probably not though, because they're Orks, and thinking things through has never been their strong suit. Conclusion: when irresistible force meets immovable object. What happens when Orks try to wake a sleeping dreadnought? In short, nothing good for the Orks. The scenario perfectly encapsulates the grimdark absurdity of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. On one side, you have ancient warriors entombed in walking war machines, sleeping, away the centuries in sacred halls, guarded by warrior monks who view them as living relics. On the other side, you have fungus-based Xenos who see a big metal box with guns and immediately think, I want that. The collision between these two perspectives is as inevitable as it is catastrophic. The Orks, following their natural instincts to loot and acquire, stumble into sacred spaces they don't understand and shouldn't be in. They find dreadnoughts, these magnificent war machines, and their immediate thought is to wake them up and claim them. They have no concept of the warrior within, no understanding of the sacred nature of the machine. no appreciation for the danger they're courting, and then they wake it up. What follows is a lesson in why some things should be left sleeping. The Dreadnought awakens not to a glorious call to battle from its chapter master, but to the sight of green-skinned despoilers defiling the resting places of honored dead. The rage this inspires is focused and absolute. The Orks wanted to see what the big metal box could do. They get a comprehensive demonstration. The aftermath leaves scattered Ork bodies, damaged fortress infrastructure, and one very irritated Dreadnought pilot who just wanted to sleep for another century or two. The Space Marines get an unexpected hero stepping up in their darkest hour. The Orks get a story to tell other Orks, one that will inevitably inspire more greenskins to try the exact same thing, because that's how it works in the grim darkness of the far future. The Imperium builds fortresses and creates warrior tombs and establishes sacred traditions. The Orks crash into those fortresses, try to loot those tombs, and completely ignore those traditions. Violence ensues. The galaxy keeps turning, and somewhere, right now, a sleeping Dreadnought waits in the darkness. Its dreams, if it has them, are of battles long past and brothers long dead. It rests in honored peace, a warrior who has earned his rest 1,000 times over. Until the next group of Orks finds it and decides that waking it up sounds like a good idea. If you enjoyed this deep dive into what happens when Orks try to wake a sleeping Dreadnought, make sure to like and subscribe for more Warhammer 40k lore explorations. We've got plenty more stories from the grim darkness of the far future to share, each one diving deep into the rich, complex, and often darkly humorous universe that Games Workshop has created. Until next time, remember, some things are better left sleeping. For the Emperor.